I think that's fair to say. It's interesting when you sit in the House of Commons and you hear the other side and the lessons that they seem to have drawn from the referendum, and they really don't get it. They really don't understand the mood in Scotland, and you saw that with English votes for English laws. Their argument was this is about righting a wrong, it's about saving the Union, not seeming to grasp the damage it would do in Scotland about turning the unitary authority of the UK and Northern Ireland into an English Parliament. And you say the same here. There's a lack of understanding of what really is happening in Scotland and of their place within it. And the fact that Cameron, in the last election where I stood, his party won 14.9% of the vote, the worst result since back in the 19th century.
Yeah, I agree with what Calum says. I would just add to it that the thing that worries me most about Calum's visit, indeed any Tory visit, trying to save our place in the EU and here, is that they're fighting their own kind of campaign. It's negative, it's all about fear-mongering, Project Fear 2, if you like. I think Nicola Sturgeon, on behalf of the Scottish Government and the SNP, is absolutely spot on to say, if we're going to win this, for those of us who want to stay within the European Union, it has to be about the positive merits of staying in the European Union. And having been representing Scotland in the European Justice and Home Affairs Council and previously the Environment Council, I see the problems that there are in Europe are not about Europe itself, it's about how you're being represented in Europe and the type of line that the UK government has taken. They have isolated us to a great degree in the negotiations. They are arguing for things that aren't in our interests and in our cultural mindset. We have a different view of Europe to the Tory party, so that they can only, in some respects, in trying to come up and argue for a Remain vote, do us harm by making the wrong kind of arguments. We need to be in the front foot saying what's good about Europe. It's not perfect, it does need reform in some places, but there's a lot of good about the European Union, including the air quality, the water quality, protection of our wildlife, and many other facets, competition, law, protection of human rights, protection of workers' rights. These are all things that are good things about Europe, and unfortunately I think those are things that Cameron will avoid talking about.
Yes, quite clearly. I think I find it fascinating to try and understand motive when you're hearing an argument, and how much of the motive is for constituents and the population at large, or for the individual themselves. I thought the headline in the Independent this week was "Genius out for himself" for Boris, and with a big picture of Boris, because there are definitely individuals and groups that are only thinking of themselves. I think that there are lots of complex arguments. Both sides will instinctively exaggerate positions. But what that speaks to me is that an investor environment that is actually really worried about the position of the City of London, is worried about perhaps views across Europe that want to see transaction type taxes. But actually even they, with such a strong vested interest, can't escape the fact that there are serious risks, and if you've got money in our stock market, you should be worried about it. And I don't want to emphasise that too much, just like Paul says, it's about a positive case for Remain, but they are worried, and that speaks volumes. Yeah.
Well, I suppose the famous GER figures that we all use are based on estimates, based on population share of GDP. They're not actual income tax figures, not actual corporation tax figures, etc., etc. So nobody knows for sure exactly how much revenue Scotland raises in terms of tax. It may be more than we are being told. And so for having a fiscal framework that does not punish us, gives us stability for that first 5-6 years, allows us to establish the actual data of how much income tax is generated in Scotland. That allows us to understand what marginal movements in tax rates will generate for future, allows us to have a more sophisticated understanding of our macroeconomy and how to make it click, how to make it work effectively, both raising revenue for services, but also to make the economy more vibrant, which is what we're all about. So it's an important period of stability, the fact that there's no detriment in that period, and that importantly for the negotiations when it's reviewed, that the Scottish Government has had parity of esteem with the Treasury and the UK Government again. so that it has to be agreed by both governments, not just the UK government imposing a solution on us. So it's hugely important in a number of ways, but I certainly believe that John Swinney has played a blinder.
Super.
I think Nicola Sturgeon has played a blinder, and we have, thankfully, because it looked pretty dodgy for a while, the kind of offer that was coming from the Tories, we've pulled off a deal which is at least no detriment to Scotland, and we can allow us to establish that tax base. Well, we obviously have, and this cuts across what colleagues are doing at Westminster as well, trying to change the existing system, because obviously a lot of powers are still reserved. But if we've got key sectors that we have, we want to look at how we can stimulate them. Now, corporation tax powers can be used as a sort of fine-tuning instrument. So in Ireland, they've done things for the games industry, done things for the film industry. I'm not talking about blanket tax changes if they aren't affordable, but if we've got a growing sector we want to really give a kick on to and get it to grow employment and prosperity as well, we'll have that more finesse set of tools to work with. We've got a bit of a blunt instrument with the powers we've been given. We're using income tax, and as you know, we have to change both upper and lower rate of tax. I would like to think in future we'll get to a position where we can use a full suite of taxes and financial incentives to raise new revenue where it's appropriate, but also to incentivise business to invest. Because regions like the Borders desperately need money to go into R&D and innovation, and having some powers to stimulate that would be very welcome. But Calum will know this on a day-to-day basis. He's having to fight the good fight in Westminster for us.
No, so I think it is about, as much as anything, it's about confidence. And we know that their strategy seems clearly to have been, let's give the guys the powers, slash their budget, that they'll have no choice but to take them. And then to stand still, they're going to have to raise taxes. And people are going to go, whoa, what's this higher taxes? And we're not seeing any change. If anything, because of the gap that had forced in us, they would fall. And the way we've held our nerve is so critical, because suddenly it changes the game. We start not from an inflated position, but with a level playing field. And that's really all we've ever wanted, is a fair level playing field. And then from there, with everything we do differently, we prove our competence, we gain confidence in the Scottish people more and more. So a blinder of a deal. And I remember Nicola coming in to see our group in Westminster, and she's obviously talking in detail with the MSPs some time ago and saying, by the way, we will not sign this. We will not sign this if we're going to lose money.
Well, obviously, the per capita indexation model is the one that we were going for adjustments to the tax. The block grant that comes to Scotland, putting away the tax powers. And we hope we will get that in due course, but there's obviously a period where there's kind of financial adjustment going to be made for the first 6 years, and we'll try and fight our corner thereafter. But the powers that we've got are, I think, still not what we want. If we had the full range of tax powers available to us under independence, as we made clear in the white paper, a good example is the childcare policy, that we could potentially increase the amount of childcare available to parents, whether men or women. At the moment, as things stand right now today, if we invested £300 million in childcare, it would be all cost for us. The additional revenue would be a windfall to the Treasury, and we'd see none of it because it would not be reflected in the block grant the following year, and we'd be left high and dry with the cost, but none of the revenue that came from it, from raising economic activity rates and getting more parents the ability to go back to work. The more tax powers we get, the more we're able to not only fund policy changes, but actually generate the revenue that pays for them. We still won't get the benefit from any rise in corporation tax or other taxes which are still reserved to Westminster. So in an ideal world, independence, you have a full range of tax powers that are available to you, and you win across the board. If you manage to stimulate the economy again, and the VAT, the corporation tax, the tourism revenues coming in, you name it, licensing, the works, we only have a limited range of tax powers. It's an improvement. Don't get me wrong, but it's nowhere near what we need to really make the economy sing. But we will do the best we can with the powers we've been given.
I think participation from the UK is highly selective as it is. So I'm not sure the degree to which it will influence efforts in the Aegean or elsewhere to help refugees. I mean, I think if we look at UKIP as a party, they started off as clearly an anti-EU party, and they really only got traction when they suddenly became an anti-immigration party, and the refugee crisis wrongly plays strongly into that. And I'm afraid it's going to be used as a political football. In some of the early exchanges, you saw it, where they were arguing over where the camp would be for refugees, which side of the channel would be. I mean, what a phenomenally depressing argument to have. What a pointless argument where they should be debating the fundamentals of the problem. And on the European Scrutiny Committee, where I'm a member, we've had the immigration minister in front of it. And the government policy is classic Tory policy of keep them at arm's length as much as possible. And although we can commend what they're doing, helping people in Syrian camps, what about the people that are arriving? And I'm afraid the UK already is trying not to play a role in people arriving on our shores. So I'm not sure those specific changes in relation to NATO will make a difference, but I have serious concerns over immigration and more particularly refugee crisis, and how will be abused and distorted by those trying to argue for out. And it's the most depressing aspect, I think, of the Leave campaign, because they will take advantage of it. But it's important that Cameron doesn't do the same. It's important that he doesn't play in their terms.
Well, I think it's important to make a distinction between migration and refugees.
Completely.
And this is the thing, the campaign, the negative campaign of the Brexit parties and individuals is focusing on what is a refugee crisis driven by famine, war, poverty, torture. People are being tortured. And the fact that the 20,000 that are coming to the UK are almost all people who are classed under the vulnerable person scheme as folk who have been affected by conflict directly, so they've been attacked, could be tortured, raped, abused in some way, and these are very, very vulnerable people. So I'm hugely disappointed, as are the Scottish Government. The UK Government is not taking more than 20,000. We are a very wealthy country, notwithstanding the problems we've had economically. We should be doing more. Looking at the numbers that go to Germany, smaller countries like Sweden taking huge numbers, UK should be doing far more. But I do worry, like Calum, I do worry that the EU referendum will be about migration. And under international obligations, we have international obligations to refugees, regardless whether we're in the EU or not. If they pitch up, we are obligated to help them under international law. And so that will not have any difference in that respect. And I think this is a deflection. This is about a kind of a Murdoch kind of Sky News type agenda to some degree. This kind of xenophobic kind of things keep creeping into certain parts of the political spectrum, and we have to call it what it is. It's a refugee crisis, and there are millions of people who've been displaced by a war we've done nothing to stop, and actually made worse potentially.
Let me start. So I tell you what struck me, right? And so Paul and I both lobbied the Scottish Government hard after the Hoyt knitwear situation, and Fergus Ewing came down. We had that session. I sat in the textiles breakout session, so there was a broad session, textiles breakout session. And do you know what was the first reaction of those companies that were there? Is stop talking us down. Right? We have changed. We've evolved. We're highly productive, we're efficient, we know what our market is, and don't judge us by one company that addressed a different kind of market to us that was more at the volume end, that was more in the lamb's wool space. We have evolved and we're changing. Please stop talking us down. Right? We are doing the right things. The challenge is we're not going to be the solution going forward for the borders. We are not going to be an industry that employs tens and hundreds of thousands of people, because we are a high value and high end product. So help us be that, encourage more new entrants, because it's about having more companies, not fewer bigger companies. And for me it was a little bit of an education experience, but great to hear the positivity that's there. So it's a different answer to what we've done traditionally, but we must be positive and optimistic, because the worst thing we can do is talk ourselves down, and I'm afraid that's what happens too often, especially just around the corner from you.
Yeah, indeed. You have some politicians that talk themselves down on a regular basis.
Can't think of
Calum spot on is exactly what the textile businesses were saying at the summit. And also, I think we have to bear in mind that the sector, in terms of the cashmere side of the business, as Calum's saying, is doing extremely well. They're opening up new markets in places like Brazil, of all places, that are buying a lot of cashmere sweaters, because it's the right weight and thickness for evening wear in a country that's hot during the day but quite cold at night. So they're expanding their horizons, finding new markets. There is significant inward investment into textiles as things stand. We had, when we had the Scottish Government come down to hold a cabinet in 2012, and as part of that we managed to have, at my request, a textile summit that led to 2 further summits. As a result of that, we've got a workforce development strategy for the sector, because it's got an ageing workforce, so there still will be employment opportunity. Even if the total number of employees isn't growing, there's a need to find replacement workers to replace those highly skilled people who are reaching retirement age. The sector is trying to get young people to be interested in its future, hence talking the sector in terms of it being in constant decline is very difficult, because parents will then see it as a sector they wouldn't want their children to join. But there are exciting opportunities, and I think Scotland as a country is making a vast majority of the high-end garments for the top design labels in the world. Chanel's investment in Barry Knitwear is a classic example. A company that was in financial trouble, but not because of the market, but because it had a very solid customer base, including Chanel. Chanel had such faith in the skills, the expertise of that company, they bought them, and they are now investing in them. So I think there are many highlights and many success stories, and we just need to focus on where there have been problems. It's maybe been down to the company structure, the premises, the cost base of that firm, rather than anything fundamental about the sector. The numbers, I mean, for the first 5 months are on track to smash the annual target that was set for the service. Clearly there were a lot of doommongers and naysayers that said the service would fail. Like every other project that has been built since devolution on the rails, the passenger numbers have exceeded the expectations massively, and Borders is no exception. I think there's huge pent-up demand for it. I've been astonished, and I'm sure Calum has as well, when you go into places like Hoyk, which are quite far away from the railhead. People are using the train on a regular basis. I've heard people going from Duns across to get the train, and then up to Edinburgh to avoid car parking in Edinburgh. So it's having a hugely positive impact. Retail sales in the Galloway Shields, I believe, are soaring, and hotels are doing well out of it. Calum will be closer to that than I am, but the success of the project is something I'm very, very proud of, and the government should be very proud of, because don't forget there was significant opposition in the Scottish Parliament to that project, especially from the Conservatives, but at one point from Labour as well, who were angling for money for the Glasgow Airport rail link instead of Borders Railway. But Keith Brown and ultimately Democrat persevered with it. It has been a tremendous success, and I'm sure it will power the economy of Borders for some time to come. And next step is Carlisle via Hoyk. So it's very, very premature. I think the reason why the moratorium is in place is because we simply don't know enough about the risks in terms of health, environment, and also the transport impacts of the project. And Fergus Ewing and his commission work to actually look at this, to try and get the evidence base there so we can understand the impacts. We've toughened up the regulatory environment in Scotland, so it's impossible now to have hydraulic fracturing in any site. The one site at Canopy that had that had it removed. So the government is taking a cautious approach, a precautionary principle, that we're not pressing ahead with fracking or hydraulic fracturing or coal bed methane or other technologies until such time as we know whether it's going to be bad for the environment and whether it can be properly regulated. And I think that's the sensible way to go. So I'm very surprised that a party like Lib Dems that claim to have environmental credentials are taking risks for our environment.
Yeah, I think it's staggering. I think you wonder what it means in terms of what vote they're going after. Yep. They've obviously given up in your vote and they're going after the Tory vote. I don't know. Yeah, it's a staggering.
It seems to be pro-Trident and pro-nuclear these days as well, so I think they're not the party they used to be. Well, I think if you, I mean, I can't say for certain because I'm not as close to it as I once was, but I believe one of the things we have to do, if there was a ban to be in place, we'd have to have a very good sound evidential base in which to sustain it. Because businesses could challenge it in the courts, it could be extremely damaging to the government financially if lost a significant case. against a developer who felt they'd been unfairly treated, and that was backed up by the courts. So if we do proceed with a ban, it must be on the basis of sound evidence to show we know what the risks are, we can quantify them, and therefore it's a proportionate response to have a ban. If we rush at it, we could actually set back the cause of the environment and could remove any barrier at all to what might be potentially an unsafe development to take place. So we need to be very cautious. The moratorium is a sensible way to go forward until we have that evidence base. Once we have the evidence, we can make a decision at that point, and if it requires a ban, then we'll get a ban.